Numbers tell the story. There's a crisis that's killing 35,000 people every day. In Africa, 2/3 of the rural population lack drinkable water, while 70% of the United States is dealing with drought and contamination of groundwater. Many Middle Eastern countries must import 90% of their drinking water, and in Asia, global warming and massive dams threaten 400 million people with drought and displacement. 75% of the world's population lives at sea level, and they are vulnerable to downstream flooding from big dams, as well as upstream flooding from rising seas. Some of these areas will face annihilation in the next 20 years. This is the world water crisis. Too much water, as well as too little. The greatest crisis ever faced by the human race.
Look, down there is Bangladesh, the country where I was born. It's the monsoon season, but little rain has fallen over the last 2 weeks. Yet below us, we are seeing an entire nation that is 70% underwater, where villages stand out like tiny islands in the vast sea. Pretty soon, Bangladesh could be an ocean and a desert, and pretty soon it could be gone.
Yeah, they said it has happened on a number of occasions that they didn't have any warning that a flood is imminent. And they had been sleeping at midnight. They woke up with the noise of the onrush of water, and many children fell down in water and got killed. It has happened, drowned, just drowned. It has happened. And that's why I really feel irritated when somebody says live with flood. And those who propagate live with flood, I'd ask them to live on the rooftop.
The nation of Bangladesh, with its dense population of 160 million people, sits barely above sea level in most places. This makes it prone to onslaughts from the rising waters along its coast. Since ancient times, this region has had to live with floods during the rainy season, a yearly struggle that the people of this deltaic land learned to endure. But on this day, the catastrophic increase in flooding is not the result of natural causes. It is man-made.
In the rainy season, our neighbors open the floodgate and waters come and sweeps our people sometimes into Bay of Bengal. We need some early warning for that. It would have been nice if my counterpart in India could give me a phone call that, okay, our water is rising, so you take precautions. Then we could save many valuable lives in this part of the world, in our country.
Since 1970, Bangladesh has lost more lives to flooding than any other nation in the world, 650,000 people by some estimates. And it has been the most vulnerable target so far in a new crisis, one of biblical proportions that is spreading rapidly.
Since when has water been released from reservoirs when somebody else needs it? Never. Water is released from reservoirs when there is too much already. How does that solve a flood problem? Actually, it compounds a flood problem because it means that there's already too much water in the area, and now you're going to release more because your reservoir is going above capacity.
Our people are so brave. The way they cope with the flood, if you see the situation, the way we're making up for the food damages, the way people are coming up after the flood.
Unlike a war with guns and bombs, it is not being fought by armies or being waged by soldiers against other soldiers. All the victims are everyday people, and the vast majority are poor.
It is women who are killed the most because they always try to bring the children. They can't go without the children. So it really affects. We can save many lives if we had known the information.
But Bangladesh's struggle with water in the wet season becomes a struggle for water in the dry season, and massive drought is destroying great parts of the country.
The discharge or the flow through this river inside Bangladesh has drastically been reduced.
As a member of the India-Nepal-Bangladesh Joint River Commission, Tahido Khan understands the crisis like few others.
So, with the dwindling of the flow, the water level goes down and it cannot go naturally by gravity into this Gorai River. So this mouth of the Gorai, the offtake of the Gorai, gets high and dry, absolutely high and dry. Look, there's no water over here. It's a bed of sands, the river. It's a river of sands, not of water. If this carries on for a few more years, this river will be permanently cut off from the Ganges. And this is a calamity beyond the proportions of our thinking.
It is indeed a calamity, and not just for this region. Droughts and floods are now attacking most other countries in the world. To understand the fate of Bangladesh, which is prey to all the threats from water known to man, is to understand what all of us will be facing in the coming years. Some people in Bangladesh are looking at the situation and taking action. Salik Subhan realizes that the world needs to become aware of the crisis. He began to interview many of Bangladesh's victims for this film.
I'm standing here in a railroad track in the heart of Dhaka city, where people live on the both sides of the tracks. As you can see, they made their houses with the temporary housing, with either hardboard or the plastics, and they were living like this for months at a time, where people don't have any sanitation facilities. They just made their house temporarily, and do they have to live like this? These people were displaced by the flood or by the drought. Okay, this man is saying that in a rainy season, because of the flood, whole village and whole farmland has get flooded. And এরপরে আপনি এখানে শীতের দিনে কি হয় আপনার এখানে শীতের দিনে কি জমি জমা হয় না নাকি
শীতের দিনে ওই বালুর মধ্যে কোনো ফসল হয় না
and in a dry season because they don't have any water on their rivers, all the canals, all the rivers get dry. Therefore the farmland becomes sandy and they cannot grow anything, so there's nothing to grow there. They have abandoned their villages and they came here because they have nowhere else to go. And in a world of plenty, I don't know whether people has to live like this. This is my daughter Samina. She born in Bangladesh. She came to this country when she was 7 years old, and she loves rivers. She used to love river.
There's a certain amount of time where I'm not there, so each time I go back, the water in the river is just becoming less and less every time I go. When I was little, I used to see kids swimming in the rivers and people fishing in the river, and people get a lot of their water from the river, and now they cannot do that anymore. My father has been working to help make this film for 5 years. He thinks it might make a difference in the lives of people here in Bangladesh and help everyone realize that what's happening in Bangladesh could happen to them too. And it's already started. When I'm alone with the people here, I try to smile, but I can feel their pain. It's easy to see that we're all alike, but I have a home to go to and they no longer do. In a way, they're just floating around in the water like the remains of their houses.
Bangladesh is surrounded on 3 sides by India. 54 of the principal rivers flowing through Bangladesh flow first through India, where huge dams and barrages have been built in recent years to keep the water in India during the dry season. The loser is Bangladesh. Because of Indian security issues, this is the only footage available of the Farakka Dam on the Ganges, the dam at present causing the greatest destruction upon Bangladesh. But all the Indian dams along its border with Bangladesh create havoc.
That is the zero line.
Zero line.
Zero
This
line.
is the 0 line. And from here, 150 yards, it belongs to them. This is the last point belonging to Bangladesh. And beyond that is a part belonging to India, and there's already a signboard there. You can see Government of India. Yeah.
This is supposed to be no man's land, and neither party is supposed to build or construct any sort of structure over this place.
35 years back, we were in an illusion that this country, we will liberate our country and have good neighborly relation with big neighbor like India. But no more of that illusion.
The actual borders separating India and Bangladesh bear out this illusion. In this region in the far north of Bangladesh, the Tista and Mohananda rivers define the border between the 2 countries. An electrified fence on the Indian side demonstrates how serious India is about controlling its territory.
Center line of the river is the international border. Now, they had been doing some works. I'll show you over there, on that corner, you see, there are certain structural works.
What they do, they head up the water of this little river and divert it to the Tista Canal.
What we try to do, we try to protect our own bank. You can look over there. These are the measures which we have been taking to arrest erosion on this side. The border security forces of the Indian side, they started shooting at the laborers of our side and forced the laborers to stop the work and get away from this place. We could not lay the concrete blocks along the bank. That's the problem.
Why? Why would they do this?
I don't know.
Whatever the reason, the work was stopped.
There should have been water in my palm because I'm standing in the bed of the river Mohananda. But unfortunately, what I can pick up is only sand, no water. This is only sand. Sand.
You can see the bank was there, the bank is here, but the entire bed is full of sand. There's no water. Incredible.
If you want to divert the waters, you must consult with the lower riparian or with the other co-basin country. But unfortunately, India doesn't do it. That's the tragedy. That's it. The people live here. They depend on the waters of this river. But if you usurp the water and don't give it, what sort of humanity it is? It's violation of a basic human right. Because access to water is a basic human right.
Water is both a friend and a foe.
Dr. Eelco Dijkstra is a noted authority on crisis management from the Netherlands, now teaching at George Washington University in Washington, D.C.
The vulnerability of people who live on the coastline is well known. The reason why so many people live in deltaic regions has also to do with many of the assets, the transportation. That if you take the historical perspective, for instance, in Europe, you know that that before there was any form of transportation, people traveled downstream. You see that also the migration of people, they followed the patterns of the rivers. A country like the Netherlands and all other areas like Bangladesh and Louisiana, they face 2 problems. They have to deal with the downstream of water that can cause flooding, and they are vulnerable of the instream of ocean water due, for instance, to a superstorm such as Katrina.
On the other side of the world from Bangladesh, another kind of water disaster struck in 2005. As the storm tore apart the levees in New Orleans, U.S. military and the Army Corps of Engineers ventured out to survey the colossal damage.
We were not ready for Katrina, but Katrina was not the massive storm that ultimately had been predicted for New Orleans. I mean, when you have a city, in particular New Orleans, that's some 15 feet below sea level and actually sinking every year, when you have a massive river immediately adjacent that has been treated like a machine for over a century, when we have coastal erosion that is eating away at the protective buffer of the Louisiana coastline at the rate of more than a football field an hour, every day, every year. We have a series of events that we are in no way prepared for, but the fact is it's going to get worse before it gets better.
When any country that is prone to flooding, when they exclusively think that prevention is going to solve their problem, then they are pretty much engaged in the security of the ostrich. It simply does not work. You cannot only do prevention and then fail to address the eventuality. What are you going to do in case your prevention is going to fail?
Prevention did not work in the Netherlands in 1953, when the North Sea broke through their extensive levee system, the largest in the world, killing 1,800 people.
A state of emergency has arisen in several areas in the west of the country as a result of exceptionally high tides. The water has swept over the dikes. According to information received a quarter of an hour ago, the situation is critical.
The water rose, and the people worked hard to save the dikes at any price. But it was all to no avail. An awe-inspiring flood swept over large parts of South Holland, Zeeland, and West Brabant.
People who were out in the country at the time the dikes burst were stranded. Others had to take refuge on the top floor of their houses or up trees. They barely had time to escape into the attic.
The Dutch levee and dam systems have kept this lowland country safe from the sea since the Middle Ages, but the system was no match this time for the rising tides. From the knowledge gained in that painful lesson, the Dutch returned to the drawing board to rethink their water management strategy.
You have to realize that when you talk about the Dutch response to Katrina in an effort to help the US, I mean, it hit home, literally and figuratively speaking. It hit right to the core of the Dutch feelings, because they face exactly the same problems. And they do have an affinity with the issue of flooding and how to prevent that.
The 9th Ward of New Orleans suffered the greatest damage from Katrina and desperately needed assistance to drain the water from the land. A Dutch crisis team arrived within hours to help, bringing their own high-tech pumps by air from the Netherlands.
I think that we pumped out in 4 days' time about almost 200 million liters water.
Does the U.S. have any kind of pumps like this?
No, they have bigger pumps, but there have a lot more time needed to fix the pumps. And yeah, it's waiting for them when they're going to start, and you see the level going down. It's about 4 feet lower than we started. So it will take another 5 days to get it dry.
When a disaster like this happens, it's no wonder that people get desperate.
So they leave a visual record to pronounce that there have been in the houses, inspected it, and put on the doors what they found. The experience, what's happened in New Orleans to myself, is that when I drove there with the car and see the damaged things, and the water has come in to that place and damaged everything, houses, industry, etc. I thought when it happened in Holland.
One lost photo among millions around the world. They all look much the same.
Scene of a crime.
Jaap van Wissen and Salik Sabhan are from two of the most densely populated countries in the world, and both countries are at sea level or lower.
Since our countries are the most at risk, Jaap and I are working together. He has great deal of useful information about controlling flood that I am passing on to the government of Bangladesh, but it has so little resources to do anything.
When the oceans rise or when a big storm hits, these two countries are in more danger and stand to suffer the greatest damage from climate change. But the Netherlands has learned how to control the waters, while Bangladesh has not.
The low-lying areas in the world, such as Bangladesh and places like Vietnam, and there are many more because 75% of the world's population lives in what they call deltaic regions, clearly they can benefit from the technology that the Dutch have developed. The Dutch had to do that not as an item of luxury or economic growth, but as a singular mean of survival to let the Netherlands continue to exist. Because if the Netherlands would get flooded, 70% of the country would disappear, and it would essentially mean the end of the Netherlands as we know it.
A similar amount of Bangladesh would also disappear if a Katrina-level storm hit that country.
Look what this cyclone did to the rainforest on the coast. Thousands of people died, not to mention animals. But the jungle helped block the seawater from coming further up the river and killing more people.
This area in Bangladesh is called Sundarban, the largest coastal rainforest in the world.
It's the home of millions of people and many rare animals. But with floodwaters from India and the ocean getting higher, the Sundarban is disappearing quickly.
Scientists are predicting it may soon go underwater permanently.
The situation in Bangladesh is very similar to the situation in the Netherlands as it is in Louisiana with the Mississippi Delta. All these countries that are downstream, they are faced with an erosion of their coastline, and they are completely dependent on other countries that are more upstream and control the amount and the quality of the water that comes downstream. And this is an issue that, in my opinion, has been pushed to the back, particularly for political reasons, whereas it is actually about the livelihoods and the survival of local communities that live there.
Every year, Bangladesh, one of the world's poorest nations, must dig itself out of flood damage and build new roads after India unloads its dams without warning.
India is the super daddy of South Asia, and Bangladesh is a poor country which is, in terms of water, almost at the mercy of India.
India is planning to withdraw water from Bangladesh's major river, the Brahmaputra, which supplies 65% of all the fresh water in Bangladesh. The Indian government plans to siphon off water from the great river and divert it through 40 new canals into southern India. It's a project that will cost $120 billion. This mega plan is called the River Interlinking Project, which the Indian government hopes to complete within a decade, and thereby 2/3 of Bangladesh could become a desert.
So what you're doing is transferring the Brahmaputra water before it enters Bangladesh, take it around this country through the chicken's neck, and then let the water flow to first Ganga, then Mahanadi, and then lower down to the other states.
Vijay Paranjapi, professor of water management at Delhi University in India, has studied the proposed mega project in depth.
So we said that two key links are these, the Sarda, and then Brahmaputra to Ganga, and Ganga to Mahanadi, Mahanadi to Godavari, Godavari to Chennai. So these are the key links. The rest is sham. It doesn't link anything to anything. Yes, you will not be affected, as in you will not be displaced. Yes, true. You will not be flooded, true. But you will be dried out, because all this water, which is the surplus waters from Brahmaputra, will bypass Bangladesh.
But what is this dam building frenzy all about in India and other countries?
The power which is expected to harvested from these dams is 3 times more than the peak demand of the country. So what exactly we are planning is to export electricity through international power grid to Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia and Thailand at the cost of uprooting indigenous people in Northeast. 40 dams are for sure, they are saying is coming up, 40 dams.
Yeah, well, big dams means big business, and big business means vested interests. What we are seeing now is a structural problem of a magnitude that even the vested interests cannot stop.
The Sardar Samovar Dam on the Narmada River in India has raised grave public doubts among the Indian people themselves as to the value of big dams. Not only do mega dams siphon off water from other localities in need of it, but they force displacement of people who must flee the rising waters. Hundreds of thousands of residents of the region have already been displaced, with little or no help from the Indian government to relocate them.
See, this NHPC and NIPCO are the 2 giant corporations in India. Now they have tools and engineers ready. They have to pay the engineers and they have to use the tool. Now this whole structure has to be supported by building dams. So they just take a contour map and they say, here we will make a dam, without consulting anybody, without taking people into consideration.
Now the Indian government and corporate interests are planning to raise the level of the dam yet another 38 feet. Entire villages and communities are already underwater here. Raising the level of the dam much higher will displace an estimated 35,000 more families. Where locals may have moved about on foot, bicycle, or car, they must now use boats, which carry them over their submerged homes. If Bangladesh is suffering from the Indian government's dam-building mentality, so is India itself. People try to salvage their belongings, even the very stones of their homes, in hopes of rebuilding somewhere else.
The experts on this subject say that building dams is a crime. You see, maybe 20 or 30 years people thought all over the world that we must build dams and to preserve water for the lean season. Now this is the general idea that we must destroy all the dams, we must let the rivers flow naturally.
Perhaps this may be a bit extreme, but many Indian activists agree with the celebrated writer Sunil. Meda Patkar is one of the most vocal anti-dam activists in all of Asia. She shares her concerns with Bangladesh and what will happen if the ongoing dam building in India continues.
Not just the farmers, but the Diara, the changing routes and the affected population, as well as the fish workers in whole of this stretch of the larger valley of Ganges are facing hell. And hence the Bangladesh people know that if the Ganges is diverted before it enters Bangladesh, unless China diverts it before Brahmaputra enters India, that will really affect Bangladesh. The rivers would be dry, and they will not be able to survive. So the members of parliament to the government of Bangladesh, along with the various people's organizations, are questioning this.
A letter from the Indian government in Delhi informing them of the situation they are in is of little value to these people displaced by the Sardar Samovar Dam. The faces of displaced humanity throughout the world may be different, but the reality of their suffering is the same.
The common people with simple lifestyles are really saving environment because they are not selling rivers. Interlinking of rivers, on the other hand, is a very distorted and perverted solution, which is not a project as yet, it is still a concept. But the human populations will not survive if the environment is not taken care of. And that's not to be done superficially. Relief with dignity should be the motto, and for that the community's involvement.
Political promises have no value because they don't reveal facts. Have we made an agreement with China? What is the assurance that all the waters which enter into Assam from China will actually enter? Because they are doing a lot of interbasin transfer themselves.
This is what one worst thing can happen in future. If China feels that it should happen, it can happen. And there is no reason that China will not think this way.
China, the largest nation in the world, is situated just to the north of India and Bangladesh. It has its own growing crisis with flood and drought.
People say that the Third World War, if there is any Third World War, it will be on the cause of water, sharing water.
Using India's tradition of nonviolent protest to effect change, Meda Patkar and two other supporters began a hunger strike in Delhi to force the Supreme Court of India to halt the raising of the Sardar Samovar Dam. People from all over India came to raise their voices and their fists in what became a mega protest against the government's water management policies. Many came from Bangladesh to join in the massive turnout. While few people in the United States knew of the events in Delhi, the eyes and ears of the rest of the world were there as satellite dishes lined the streets. After weeks without food, Meda Patkar's physical condition was becoming serious. To protect itself, the government ordered police to take her by force to a military hospital. Her final speech before being led away was translated into English.
The government of Madhya Pradesh wants to sacrifice its people and interests at the altar of not development but politics. The tie is between truth and untruth, and between vulgar and selfish party politics on one side and democratic values and processes on the other. We know that this is not a question related to one dam only, but to the future of democracy and people's rights.
Meanwhile, water shortages in Bangladesh caused in part by India's water management policies, have unknowingly created another catastrophic problem, this time with its groundwater.
The India and Bangladesh populations are growing. Therefore, India is cutting off Bangladesh water. So Bangladesh has to find their water underground. So they have to go deeper. And more deeper they go, they found that arsenic contaminated water.
If they control the whole water system from that side without consulting us, it can mean, I would say, a whole end of the civilization in this part of the world.
Dr. Bilkis Haq, Director of Environment and Population Research in Bangladesh, knows exactly where arsenic contamination is headed.
Yes, it was all river. The whole thing is a river. And this village is badly contaminated by arsenic. And then these people have to go and drink the arsenic contaminated water because they can't use the river water. Even now, many women don't come because they can't walk this long distance. It's half a kilometer from their village. But this river was to be very close to their village. I know many women here, they tie their children with the pillar of their houses to go and collect the water because they have to walk for 2 hours or 3 hours. So they just tie the children with the pillar so that the children don't get lost. The shop tubewell contaminated arsenic as well. So all the villages in her tubewell are contaminated with arsenic. So they are drinking that water.
There are about 12,000 drinking water hand pumps, of which, like I told you, 70% are contaminated. The people in Bangladesh were mainly drinking hand pump water. And you know that we have this arsenic problem where 30 to 60 million of the people are affected by the arsenic contamination.
I'm so disturbed when I see people drinking water they know is poison. The government can only make a red mark on the pumps to show which ones are contaminated. They have no money to do anything else.
In Bangladesh, testing well water for arsenic has become a grim task.
We don't have access to safe water. And if you consider the health impacts, according to the scientists, the people who are malnourished are at the highest risk of negative health impacts from consuming arsenic-affected water. Now, the irrigation tube wells, there are about 2,000 irrigation tube wells. We are sucking the groundwater for the irrigation purposes. So these tube wells, we have about 2,000 in that area, and about 73% of these irrigation wells are also contaminated with arsenic.
Arsenic is perhaps the most dramatic example where we're seeing people in Bangladesh going blind because of the concentration of arsenic. We're having an ongoing struggle with our EPA right now about what the appropriate levels are. One of the first challenges for the Bush administration was they were going to relax the standards for arsenic, some 50 times larger than the EPA recommended allowance.
The Bush administration made the choice to protect big business at the expense of the environment, supporting the easy solution of dumping industrial waste into the nearest river or lake.
Now, if we talk about the arsenic going to the food chain as well, that's a huge thing. So these people are consuming arsenic through water. They're consuming arsenic through food chain. 30 to 60 million of the people are affected by the arsenic contamination.
With the help of international aid organizations, arsenic clinics are being set up around the country to help save lives.
Palm of the hand and skin and their nail.
এগুলি তো পরের ভারতে আমি ডাক্তার দেখেছি, ইন্ডিয়ার ডাক্তার দেখেছি।
ধরে শ্বাস নেন।
Arsenic.
Arsenic
causes keratosis. Arsenic causes that, and she has the same thing.
Why? We are dying for water. We're dying of diseases related to water.
People are dying of arsenic all over the country. They are dying in a village and in a hospital, as cancer grow from their skin to inside of their body.
These wells are increasingly drawing on groundwater because we're using more of it, and there are more of us. It is a global phenomenon with serious consequences.
And people everywhere are worried, but they do not know what to do. They have to drink water of some kind, even if it kills them. আমার গহীন জলের নদী, আমি তোমার জলে রইলাম বসে জনম অবধি।
Oh, my river deep, I've been floating around in your water all my life. Your flooding washed away my home. When I landed upon an isle, you washed away that too. Now, having lost everything, I go on staying afloat in your water. I can rebuild my broken home, but why did you break my heart, O river? Once the jewel of the heart is lost, it's lost forever. If lost in the ebb, the heart never returns with the high tide. When you wash away banks, O river, you wash one at a time. But when you break a heart, O river, you break both its banks. And once broken, no isle emerges for the heart to land upon. Water has been so critical to the survival of the human race that it's the subject of mankind's first written account. The story of the Great Flood appeared again in the Bible 1,000 years later. But if God was deemed responsible for the Great Deluge, man himself now appears to be responsible through ignorance and greed for most of the water problems in today's world.
Since last December to this December 1 year, I have written 4 letters inviting them to come and visit Bangladesh, sit in a meeting of the Joint River Commission, but on some pretext or other, they have not come. They said it's not possible for them to come. Our people are getting frustrated.
So when there is a problem with water, somebody is cutting off their water supply, then they get very angry. And when people get angry, because this is the only way they can survive with water. So once they get very angry, they do desperate things.
Hundreds of thousands of people are coming from all over the country and from abroad to protest what India is doing to our rivers. And it is getting very serious, and it's reaching to boiling point.
People in Bangladesh have been gathering in great numbers across the country to protest India's arbitrary water policies. This demonstration drew nearly 100,000 people. Salik was there.
How can one country withhold river water from another country that needs it, just to keep it for itself? So big corporation can sell the electricity it generates to other countries. It's just greed.
বারাক্কা দিয়ে ভারতের কোনো উপকার হবে না, এটা ভারত ভালো করেই জানতো। বারাক্কার উদ্দেশ্য ছিল বাংলাদেশের নদীকে মরুভূমি করে এই দেশের মানুষকে দরিদ্র করা। এই দেশের মানুষ দরিদ্র হলেই
ভারত উপকৃত হবে, এটাই ছিল তাদের আসল উদ্দেশ্য।
বাংলাদেশ চ্যাপ্টারের সভাপতি, আপনাদের বলা হয়েছে যে 54টা নদী ভারত থেকে বাংলাদেশে এসছে। নদী বাঁচাও, দেশ বাঁচাও। সমৃদ্ধি কামনা করছি।
Numerous memoranda, demonstrations, mass protests, letters, you name it, have been ignored. The government proceeds as though there are no people to be consulted.
I'm not a prophet of doom, but it's not to scare people, it is to make people aware that things are going on that cannot just be solved by waiting till it happens and then responding. This is the time to take proactive action, and you start by making people aware that there is a problem in the first place.
Dutch water management experts are lending their support to Bangladesh and other countries around the world, studying levees and dams that might be at risk, including many in the American Southwest.
If you go to California, they have similar problems just waiting to happen over there. Reports have indicated that there's a lack of maintenance of the levee systems in California.
Water is taken out of the Sacramento River into the Butte Basin. It's stored in the Butte Basin, and then it's slowly metered out. If you look at the designs, you'll see the large woody debris. That's in there for fish habitat. That's cabled into anchors in the design. Also, both of these projects have berms going out. Those berms will be covered with rock, and then they'll be planted. They'll put grasses, sedges, and trees down at the bottom end.
Well, when the trees die, then all the roots that are in the levee, get rotten. And, well, this in short, then you have a big hole, or a system of holes in the levee. And when there is a stormy situation and the trees fall down, then they can take with them, all the roots, and then you have an open spot, in the levee. That's dangerous.
This is part of, this conflict between environmental value versus performance. And, this is looked at as, this is some of the best habitat that exists in the Central Valley.
But on the cost of safety.
Yep.
Well, this is a discussion in the Netherlands, that is stopped immediately. No trees on the levee.
Yeah.
They are cut out. We are very, very strict on that, no trees on the levees. No houses on the levees either. For romanticism, it's perfect, to have your house there on the levee, but it's no good.
Okay, well, we should get going. We get back.
Oh, sorry.
From an international perspective, how great would it be if you were able to take the best that the United States has to offer and the best that the Dutch have to offer, fuse it, and then come up with a joint venture, sort of a template of skills and knowledge and experience that you then could offer to the international community in low-lying areas such as Bangladesh and Vietnam and all these other deltaic regions in the world.
Breakthrough technology can provide hope. Here at George Mason University in Virginia, engineering professor Abul Hassam, himself from Bangladesh, has just invented a life-saving water filter for those millions at risk from arsenic poisoning.
So they take that water and just dump it here.
Right.
Ah, inside there. Okay.
Yeah. So what they do, they have water and they just
put it in there.
Right here.
Yeah.
just 1 hour. It will take 1 hour.
So the ingredients are cheap, and it does not require electricity.
No.
So it's perfect for use, irrespective of economical circumstances, irrespective of local problems. Does the United Nations know about this? Would that be an entity that you feel could take a project like this on?
Yes, UNICEF is funding most of the water projects, especially this kind of arsenic and other projects in Bangladesh. And
because it is particularly UNDP, which actually came out recently and declared the right, that it is a basic human right to have access to fresh water. That's
Dr. Hussam's simple arsenic filter is so important for saving lives that the National Engineering Academy awarded a first prize of $1 million for his achievement.
Please welcome Dr. Hussam to the stage.
He plans to use the money to supply filters to those who need them in Bangladesh and India.
In Bangladesh, arsenicosis has been proved as a disease of poverty, that is, poor are disproportionately more affected than the rich. I want to dedicate this achievement to my late mother, Mrs. Nurul Nahar, and late father, Dr. Kassim, who taught us that hard work with full commitment aimed at human good is the essence of life.
Systems do not change themselves. Only individuals can change systems.
any person that works in emergency management for any prolonged period of time becomes indestructively positive. So rather than waiting till something happens and then having to respond to it, I often try to convince people to be more sort of proactive and anticipate, be prepared. Being prepared for these kind of things is clearly not an item of luxury, but one of necessity, also for Bangladesh.
Water is very precious for us. Water is a precious commodity all over the world. People say that future wars might take place on water. So this precious resource of water means our life and death.
It is still simmering, but it is reaching that boiling stage. Yeah, with their mega plan of river linking project, if that is implemented, by God, you can say it will be the end of Bangladesh.
We as a human race are responsive in nature. We wait until something happens and then we take actions. And in isolated incidents, you know, that works. You wait till something happens. And of course, like people say, history repeats itself. No, history doesn't repeat itself. Humans are making the same mistake over and over again. So to blame history, you don't take responsibility for the lessons that are learned but are not put into practice next time.
There's so much suffering and death in Bangladesh, but the people keep coming back from storms, rising oceans, floods, droughts, and now poison. We've survived so far, but now, I don't know.
A river is not just water. I'm sure this holds true for rivers all over the world. Rivers have a particular spiritual and cultural significance. And I think we have to respect that at some point, that it is not a commodity of so many cusecs of water. They embody the best of human life, the fact of life itself. Without water, there is no life.
The warning bears repeating. This is a world crisis we must all face now. With too much water, without water, there is no life.